Okay, some current events have me wanting to talk about textualism, and specifically Martin Van Buren supposedly being a textualist to the Constitution and not defending the Latter-day Saints in Missouri. Okay, a lot of people credit him with being a strict textualist, but this was more of a faction of interpretation of the Constitution at the time. And I want to go ahead and prove that his reference to the supposed text of the Constitution was insufficient. And this is one of the main problems we have with a lot of libertarians right now as they pick on President Trump. Not that I'm an exact super defender of President Trump, but maybe he's seeing something in them similar to what Wilford Woodruff and others saw in Martin Van Buren when they got baptized in the St. George Temple for all the presidents of the United States except for Martin Van Buren, as I understand it. This is the big deal. Martin Van Buren could have looked at, Article 4, Section 4, which says the United States shall guarantee to every state of the Union, and I'm paraphrasing here, a republican form of government, and it shall protect them from invasion, and upon application of either the legislature or the executive when you can't get the legislature together, referring to state legislatures and executives apparently, because application of the legislature is a little bit more clearly laid out, supposedly in Article 5, so that makes sense, protect them from domestic violence, right? So, was Martin Van Buren going to expect Governor Boggs, the same one who issued the extermination order against the Saints, was he going to expect him to apply to the federal government to protect Missouri from domestic violence? Not even kind of, okay? Now, Missouri had for apparently 7 years been receiving a steady influx of Latter-day Saints, almost entirely from other states. Now, why would they have felt so confident moving to another state within the Union? Well, let's look at Article 4, Section 2, Clause 1. The citizens of the several of each state shall be entitled to the privileges and immunities of the several states, basically when moving from state to state, right? So, if I'm in Illinois, I expect that there are certain privileges and immunities that I have when I move through Missouri, or that there are certain privileges and immunities that I have when I move from Ohio to New York. This was part of the Constitution agreement. Now, what is the Constitution? The Constitution isn't just a constitution according to itself. It isn't just a constitution. It is the supreme law of the land, therefore making it a law. If it's the supreme law of the land, it's not just a law, it's the most important law. So this is Article 6, Clause 2. The Constitution, which has been through the Article 7 and Article 5 process, is the supreme law. The laws, which have been through the Article 1, Section 7, Clause 2 process, are part of the supreme law of the land. And then the treaties, which have been through the Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 process, are part of the supreme law of the land. And I just set them in the order of which one's ranking more importantly, right? Now, in Article 2, I want to say Section 3, that's where it references the president communicating with Congress and what have you, and him being the commissioner of the officers in the United States government. And also it says he shall take care that the laws of the land be faithfully executed, that the laws be faithfully executed, right? That's called the take care clause is what we call that. It doesn't say he probably ought to take care that the laws are faithfully executed, or it might be a good idea for him to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. It says he shall. In legal language, that's strong language. And once again, the Constitution, according to itself, is the law, the supreme law of the land. So if any laws are in conflict with it that are of a lesser degree, state laws in conflict with it, right? According to Article 6, Clause 2, if the treaties are in conflict with the Constitution, if the bills passed through the Article 1, Section 7 process are in conflict with the Constitution, the Constitution trumps it, okay? And the president, Martin Van Buren at the time, had this take care clause, this obligation. And Article 4, Section 2, Clause 1 is part of the Constitution. The privileges and immunities, if you're moving from one state to another state, traveling through what have you, you are entitled to the privileges and immunities of all the states, right? So I've got a goat here shaking my little stand I brought out with me. And you're just cute, buddy. Are you cute, Luna? So this right here is the ultimate decider of the responsibility of the president, because there are privileges and immunities. This is, they have the expectation that they can move from state to state without being threatened to be killed by that new state they moved to. That is the ultimate definition of a violation of Article the Fifth Amendment, and also the Fourth Amendment was being violated right there. Now, okay, John Marshall went ahead and refused to take a case, Baltimore v. Maryland, where he simply said the Bill of Rights is only meant to be a restriction on the federal government. It is not meant to be a restriction on the state government. It's not meant to be a definition of the privileges and immunities. What a load of baloney. And to top it off, what in the Constitution says that if a Supreme Court justice says something like that, that it's suddenly like the permanently binding, validly permanent meaning of the Constitution? Nothing. It's not there. It's not part of what's mentioned in Article 6, Clause 2. It's not part of what's mentioned in Article 5, which is the only way to change the meaning of the Constitution. The wording of the Bill of Rights, 9th and 10th Amendments being the real clear rules of construction. The wording of the Bill of Rights is, except for the First Amendment, which says it's no state shall. All the others is, period, you just don't do it if you're government at all. You just don't do it if you're government at all. Okay? And that's for Amendments 2 through 8. Okay? And somebody might say, well, no, that's not the nature of things to have it apply to all levels of government. Look, the Constitution was nonstop addressing all levels of government right from the start. You've got Article 1, Section 8, Section 9, and Section 10 right there in a row. Yes, the Constitution was addressing what the states were and weren't allowed to do, and what the federal government was and wasn't allowed to do right from the start. Okay? So, Martin Van Buren had a responsibility, a take care responsibility to carry out the supreme law of the land, make sure it was faithfully executed. Okay? And instead of dealing with that, he isolated himself to the text of a simple portion of it, probably Article 4, Section 4, and said, yeah, they're not applying for us to come stop the domestic violence, so we're not going to stop it. Or maybe he isolated himself to John Marshall's opinion, which is even dumber, because there's nothing in the Constitution that allows for John Marshall's opinion or any Supreme Court justice's opinion to be the binding meaning of the Constitution. And so, yes, he violated his oath of office. And so this is the problem with, I hate it when people call me a textualist, a strict textualist, a strict constructionist. I am a textualist because it's text. That's what it is. It's written down. But I'm big picture textualist. Can you cross-reference everything? So say, for example, real quick, here we're going to pick apart something. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 is the revenue clause, right? It's got a real clear restriction. Hey, we're not going to spend your money on anything other than general welfare and common defense, and then it immediately enumerates the general welfare expenditures and the common defense general expenditures, right? And you might say, well, is that the way it is? Yes, as Madison said, it's the way it is. But you can also look at Article 1, Section 7. It doesn't open up with the process for writing bills. What does it open up with? It opens up with, hey, taxation, we're not going to let anybody else control revenue and all that kind of stuff except for the most popular house of Congress. Just to let you know, they were basically constantly addressing the concern over taxation in the first place. They were, everything about it was, the founders were nervous about the power of taxation. And so when you read the full context, there's an enumeration in clauses 2 through 9 of general welfare clauses. And then in clauses 10 through 17 of common defense clauses. It's not that complicated, okay? Thomas Jefferson is accused of violating the Constitution with the Louisiana Purchase. What a load of baloney. Okay, it's Article 1, Section 17, or Section 8, Clause 17 allows them to purchase ports for common defense, right? Now, at the moment that Napoleon said, yeah, I'm not interested in selling you just that, I want to sell you the whole area, and I'm going to give you a killer deal on it. Well, if they wanted those ports, then it became necessary by way of, you cannot control what the seller is willing to do for you. You have no control over that. So if you still want those two ports, it became necessary. Then the question is it proper to the Constitution? Yes, it still fits common defense and general welfare, and as a matter of fact, is one of the best things ever done in American history. One of the most consistent with the purposes of the Constitution in American history. So again, my thought is you have to be able to cross-reference. You have to know the Constitution so well. If all you're looking at is Article 1, Section 8, you're not looking at the whole Constitution. You're just not. If all you're looking at is the Bill of Rights, you're not looking at the Constitution. If all you're looking at is Supreme Court rulings, you're not even kind of looking at the Constitution, because the Constitution is not Supreme Court rulings. And so Martin Van Buren, they did later on get baptized for him, but I can see why they didn't at the time. And I think he knew exactly what he was doing. He was familiar enough with the text, but he's like, and he should have drawn the cross-reference conclusion there of the take care clause to the Constitution being the supreme law of the land, to then portion of that Constitution says citizens from this state are entitled to the privileges and immunities of all the citizens of the different states. It wasn't that complicated. We know that Missouri was corrupt as hell. It was a land grab, all that other stuff. We could pick that apart, but I'm getting at Martin Van Buren. That's the only part I'm interested in. Okay, as evil as what was done in Missouri, the failure of that president to do his job, which would have been an unpopular job, I don't care. Right is right, wrong is wrong, and the Constitution did grant him authority over that by virtue of his take care clause, and the Constitution being the supreme law of the land, and the Constitution saying that part of that law is the entitlement of citizens from this state being entitled to the privileges and immunities. And there was still an ongoing influx, and the Missourians didn't want it, and they wanted to grab the land, all that kind of stuff, and he knew that. And so don't be a strict textualist without being able to cross-reference. If you can't cross-reference, then just don't claim to be a strict textualist. I don't even like, again, factions when it comes to interpretations of the Constitution. Just read the Constitution and get to know it. So that's all. Thanks for listening, you guys. Sorry if I sounded grumpy, but you have to admit that's one of the most annoying things in the history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it's an annoying precedent for how the Constitution was being interpreted that should have never been allowed to happen. Probably could have prevented the Civil War had they been honest about those kind of things up front. All right, thanks for listening, you guys.